This is Agriculture Today. I'm Samantha Bennett with the K-State Radio Network. Today on this Tuesday's programming, we have ahead of us Cary Rivard. He is a K-State Extension Specialist and the Center Director of the Olathe Horticulture Research and Extension Center. He provides insight into the wholesale market and planning considerations for producers looking to sell in those markets. Also ahead, K-State Digital Agronomy postdoctoral fellow Adrian Correndo shares information on how to use the yield component method for estimating corn yield potential, which is especially important this year due to concerns with heat stress and water stress in corn. We end with this week's Milk Lines from Mike Brouk. He shares information about the Kansas All Breeds Junior Dairy Show, which will be occurring in Salina, Kansas. That and more awaits us ahead on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. We are back now with Cary Rivard. He is an extension specialist and the center director of the Olathe Horticulture Research and Extension Center. And today he's here with us to talk about entering the wholesale market as a producer. So, Cary, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks. It's nice to be here.
Absolutely. So like I said, we're going to really talk about the wholesale market in terms of what that means to enter as a producer. So what are some of the benefits and cons of entering a wholesale market?
Well, I mean, obviously, one of the immediate benefits to think about, of course, is the money, right? There's only so much produce that you can sell at a farmer's market or a CSA. And at the end of the day, if you sit out there all afternoon and only bring in a few $100s, that may not be enough revenue generation to really support the farm and the business that you want to have. So I think what a lot of growers mention when they get into wholesale, what they like is they drop off a truckload of produce at a grocery store and they can bring in several $1,000s in that one moment, as opposed to working in retail markets where you have to work pretty hard to get a few hundred. So the benefit and the increase in revenue is one of the most important things that growers bring up when I talk to them. The other thing that can be a benefit is the ability to use contracting and to be able to plan out your life a little bit, right? So if you're working with retail markets, there can be a lot of variability in what people are purchasing and who's at the market and maybe potential competition that are out there. Whereas in wholesale markets, if you're working with a grocery store or restaurant, those folks are going to know what they want long ahead of time and typically will want to enter contracts at the beginning of the growing season so that you can deliver those products for them to sell or resell or utilize in their restaurant or whatever. So, of course, that can also be a con as well. You know, for newer growers and beginning farmers, which is what a lot of the vegetable and fruit producers are in Kansas, can be a little bit stressful or even overwhelming to enter into contracts with some of these companies at the beginning of the season. So you need to be careful and make sure that you know what you're getting yourself into. And so we oftentimes recommend people to start entering those wholesale markets, you know, after they've been growing for a few years and they've got fairly established yield records and production records. And so they know what they can promise to those wholesale buyers because, again, they're going to be a little bit more formal about what they require.
So definitely not something you want to jump in with kind of a blind faith in your ability to produce.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, again, for some people, those contracts are really nice and it's sort of an insurance policy that they know they have those things sold. But if you're a new farmer and you're new to this or you have somewhat variable production over time, then that can be a big stressor in your life as well.
So when it comes to entering these wholesale markets, there's a lot of things to consider, obviously. What are some of those?
Yeah, so, you know, it's interesting. It seems like such a simple thing, but I've heard several of our sort of better growers in the state that are real successful with this talk about you want to grow crops that you like to grow and that you're successful at growing. Mm-hmm. And especially if you're going to get into wholesale markets where you need to push higher volumes, they're going to need to be crops that you've got a history of being able to produce well. And also that you have the equipment and the storage capabilities in order to get it out of the field, get it cooled off, assuming that's what needs to be done. Or if in the case of sweet potatoes, it could be getting them cured, right? And then getting them off to that market. So having a crop that you know well and that you have the equipment and infrastructure, I guess, to handle is probably the most important thing. But then the market is going to be the next part of that too. And oftentimes growers will talk to us about how, you know, maybe they were selling tomatoes to a grocery store because that's something they have a lot of. And the produce manager said, well, is there a way that you can start bringing in some local watermelons, right? And so the next year they started growing watermelons for them. So, listening to the market and finding out what people in your area want, right? And whether that's wholesale or retail, that's always important. And, there's a lot of folks in Kansas that aren't necessarily really close to large metropolitan communities, right? And so in some of those smaller communities, you may have to get a little bit more proactive to find somebody who's going to be wanting to buy things at a wholesale level. So, we see people that work with schools. Again, restaurants can be a nice sort of smaller wholesale market in some of these areas. Or in some cases, you may just have to think about driving that produce a couple hours to get it to Wichita or Kansas City or Topeka so that it can be, sent to wherever it's going to go.
Absolutely. And you've mentioned quite a few of those buyers just then. So school's a unique opportunity, maybe restaurants in some cases. When it comes to contacting these potential buyers, what really should these producers be doing?
Well, I think as an extension person, I think oftentimes I really value the way our farmers and business people engage with each other, right? I mean, when you go and talk to growers, they have relationships with these buyers. They have relationships with other growers. Oftentimes, our growers are selling produce to each other. And that's actually another wholesale outlet as well. It's like, we have one grower over here in one part of the county that has a nice roadside stand. They've been selling sweet corn. Maybe they can buy a couple bins of watermelons from somebody else and sell those as well, too, right? So, I think one of the cool things about living in Kansas is people are good at cultivating those relationships. And so, that's really important. There's also places where you can actually go out and find that information as well, too. So through the Kansas Specialty Crop Growers Association, we have a directory online, and it mainly includes growers, but there are buyers that are listed on there as well. If you're in the Lawrence area, the Douglas County Extension group has done a really nice job of putting together a list of wholesale buyers that are in the Lawrence area. And I think it extends, fairly wide into Topeka as well. And so there are some listings there. We also have a new food hub in the Kansas City area, which is purchasing a lot of wholesale volume from growers, especially around here in Lawrence and Kansas City. And so there's a few places where you can go out and actually find some of those buyers. But if you go and talk to growers, oftentimes the way they develop those relationships is they just, they stop in at the grocery store or the restaurant or the school, and they just start cultivating relationships with those buyers. And that's, one of the most successful ways to really conduct business, I think.
Absolutely. Genuine connection goes a long way in terms of making those sort of relationships work. You've mentioned quite a few resources right there for those tuning in that they can utilize, but are there additional resources that you think might be helpful for people thinking about entering this market or just hoping to learn more about it?
Sure. So we just published this wholesale marketing manual through K-State Research and Extension. I think it was published in 2020. And so it's got a lot of great information in it about how you can develop some of those relationships. There are actually specific buyer profiles. And so we went around and interviewed, I think it was 6 or 8 buyers here in the Kansas City and Lawrence area. And it includes a lot of that sort of diverse group of buyers. There's a school district on there. There's a restaurant. There's a large-scale produce company. There's a smaller-scale grocery store that's featured. And so, one of the things you can do is just learn about those types of people by reading those profiles that are in the manual. And then the other thing that's really handy that's in that manual is there's actually a whole list of what we call cheat sheets for each type of crop. So tomatoes, watermelons, sweet potatoes, etc. And in the back, it shows you what the recommended packing practices are, specifically for the Kansas City Food Hub. But the Food Hub's packing practices are really similar to most grocery stores and restaurants, right? Because they're selling to a lot of those folks as well, too. So what's handy is you can actually use those cheat sheets to find out the storage temperatures, how they want them packed and bundled and packaged for those wholesale markets. And so, I know our growers have really tagged along with those cheat sheets because it just gives them information that they have right there and they can use it right away.
Absolutely. Well, that's excellent. We were talking beforehand and you mentioned there was an upcoming field day that you would love to mention as well. So tell listeners a little bit about that.
Sure, yeah. So we're hosting our annual Commercial Vegetable Research Field Day next Monday on August 8th, and that'll be from 4 to 7 p.m. And what we do, it's a fairly laid-back, casual affair, but we try and include as much learning as we can in there. So usually from 4 to about 6 or 6:30, we'll walk through the field, look at all the different research projects that are going on. We've got projects happening at the research station now from about 4 or 5 different faculty members, spanning from production to post-harvest quality to food safety to consumer sensory work. And so we'll have each of the students kind of talk about their projects. And then at the end, we just go up under the trees and hang out and have a veggie burger, talk about what we're planning for next year, essentially. And it's a good time to meet people and hang out with other farmers in the area. And one of the things we're really excited about the field day this year is that we are just actually finishing up today and tomorrow, of course, a solar-powered irrigation system that we were able to install there. And so we've got, I think there's 16 panels that power basically our entire irrigation system for our vegetable production areas. So we're really excited to be carbon-free in terms of our watering right now. And I know there's a lot of folks that are interested in adopting similar technologies. So please do come out and check it out. We'll be out there on Monday afternoon, and it's great if you can register, but we also are fine with walk-ins as well.
Absolutely. Well, great opportunity for sure. Cary, thanks so much for chatting with us today.
No worries. Thank you. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. Once again, that was Cary Rivard. He is an extension specialist and the center director of the Olathe Horticulture Research Extension Center, discussing the benefits of the wholesale market and ways to get involved. We'll be back with more ahead on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. We are back now with Adrian Correndo. He is a postdoctoral fellow in digital agronomy here at K-State. And today we're going to be talking about a subject that we're sad to have to be covering, and it's really because our corn crop this year is really experiencing severe heat stress and water stress.
Thank you, Samantha, for the invitation. And this is certainly a hot topic these days. Fortunately, with the rains last week, we got some relief. That's really good news. However, during the month of July, by the end of June, we started with a period combining both the heat stress with several days, even above 100 Fahrenheit, which is not good at all for the corn crop. And also, if we pay attention to the night temperatures, were also really high, sometimes about 80. So that didn't help the most critical period of the crop. I'm talking about reproductive stages, from tasseling to now we are in with most of the corns in our 4 stage, dough stage. But certainly this combination of heat with drought stress, because by the end of June, precipitation stopped, at least in this portion of the state, central Kansas. So that produced a combined stress of water with heat, which is critical because one of the most important aspects that we need to have in our corns during the flowering period between tasseling and R1 is having synchrony between the pollen shed by the masculine part of the plant and the appearances of the silks. So basically, the appearance of the silks depends a lot on the water availability. So we have drought stress that is impacting the rate of elongation of the silks. So basically, will delay the appearance of them, and that may cause a mismatch between the availability of pollen and the appearances of the silks. So that doesn't help with the fertilization of the grains. So in that sense, we may see some symptoms that they are very, very concerning, which is the absence of grains by the beginning base of the ears or at the middle. So that means that the stress was mainly water and maybe also a combination of heat stress, because very warm temperatures affect the pollen viability. So if the temperatures are over 90, 95 degrees, the viability of pollen started to reduce, so it will last less time. And if we have our silks appearing late or at a low rate, we have that asynchrony that affects the fertilization of the grain. So In that sense, we may have absence of grains across all different parts of the year. However, this is not the only symptoms that we experience during the month of July, because we may have also grain abortion after the fertilization of the grains, and that could happen until our 3 stage, which is sometimes unlikely because normally we do have some rains by those stage. However, this July is being very tough for our corns, and we got also some grains which have been aborted after the fertilization because of this combination of heat we withdraw. So basically, by flowering, we fertilize or not the grain, but after that period, depending on the water availability and the heat stress, we may start cutting resources, and the plant will prioritize the grains which are by the base of the year. So it's very common that if we have drought stress during our 2 or 3, we may start having the absence of grain by the tip of the year. But if the stress is becoming worse, we may have probably 2/3 of the portion of the year, we may have absence, or we may see that the grains start becoming a kind of dehydrating. Mm-hmm. So that is a sign that the crop didn't have enough water availability by that stage. So it basically is aborting those grains and prioritizing the elder child, which is not the common situation in our families, but the corn plant prioritizes the older grains, which are by the base. In an article that we put last week, we kind of depict one case that we got in Manhattan, Kansas, with a corn planted in May 1st, which is kind of the ideal date for exploring potential. However, under rainfall conditions, it will highly depend on the availability of water during the critical period, which much during the first days of July in this part of the state. And in that article, we show several years showing this absence of grain across different portions of the year, showing these different symptoms, having the absence of fertility, of grain fertilization close to R1, but also grain abortion across different stages of these grains. Some of the questions that we got concern farms about this situation. We got some calls talking about how we can estimate what yield we may expect from now and ahead. So basically, the rainfall during the last week brought a huge relief. Sure. So that may improve our expectation of how the grain filling is going to be during the next couple of weeks. Normally, we use the yield component method, which is basically relies on counting the years that we have per acre. So for that, we recommend to take portion of 17.4 feet, which is a thousandth of an acre, which will facilitate the estimation of an acre level. So basically, with that, we recommend to take about 10 times these 17.4 feet samples. And with that, we may have an idea of the average number of years that we have. Ideally, we will have 1 year per plant, which is expected in corn. So we may expect that a number close or a little lower than the plant density we have. After that, we may take several years and count the number of rows that we have by the base of the year, and then count the number of grains that we have in each of the rows. So that will give us an idea of how many kernels we have per year. So most likely we may have about 400 to 500 kernels per year. With that, we just need to multiply the number of years by the number of kernels per year, and that will have a good estimation of how many kernels per acre we have. So basically what we have pending is the expectation of the grain filling. If the grain filling is expected to be reasonably good, we may have less amount of kernels to feed into a bushel. So that may give us a number somewhere between 75,000 kernels per bushel if the grain filling conditions are ideal. But if not, we may have something closer to 105 or 110,000 kernels per bushel, which is related to poor grain filling conditions. Based on the forecast we have, even though we got this relief, so we may probably expect grain filling conditions which are average or below average. So if we use a number, don't be too much optimistic. So we may use a number close to 90 to 100. If your expectations maybe of forecasts, they are not so good, we may even increase that a little bit and using a number of 105 or a little more. So that may give us a realistic estimation.
Sure. So, yeah, this is not the time to be optimistic when you're trying to use these tools, unfortunately. And like you said, we've really had the perfect storm in terms of not having rain and then the extremely high temperatures we've been experiencing. And it's just led to this perfect situation where it's put extreme stress on these plants. So now is really the time, though, to be using this tool. And if listeners are tuning in and they want to learn more about this tool, is there a resource for them to learn more about it?
Yeah, sure. So basically, if users can get to one of the eUpdates that we publish there, we put a very simple figure with this process of the yield estimation in 4 steps. Pretty easy. First, count the years per acre, the kernels per year, the kernels per acre, and finally putting an expectation of the kernels per bushel we have. If we have any question, we also have at Ciampiri Lab. I work with Dr. Ignacio Ciampiri. We have a bunch of resources, and if that is not enough yet, so you can give us a call and try to ask the questions that you have, and we will be more than glad to help.
Excellent. Well, as always, that resource will be in the show notes of today's episode, which can be found on agtoday.net. But Adrian, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Samantha.
Absolutely. Once again, that was Adrian Correndo. He is a postdoctoral fellow in digital agronomy here at K-State. We are going to be cutting to a short break here momentarily, but before we do that, a preview at what's to come on Agriculture Today and the rest of the week ahead. Starting off tomorrow's programming, we will be joined by K-State and Washburn University School of Law Professor Roger McOwen. He will be joining us to discuss the latest dicamba spray drift, legal issues, and cases. We will also be joined again by Sandy Johnson. She will be addressing nitrate accumulation concerns when it comes to forage in the current weather conditions we've been experiencing. Finally, to round out our Wednesday programming, as always, we will have the latest from our fun team of experts at the Beef Cattle Institute for this week's Ask the Expert segment. In the days ahead, we will also be joined by Rich Llewellyn. He will be providing coverage on what our year average grain prices have come out to so far in 2022. And what we might expect in the year ahead, 2023. He will also be previewing some upcoming agricultural economic meetings that you are not going to want to miss out on. Erin Bishop will also be joining us this week. She is a Double Up Food Bucks program manager, and she will be discussing that program and ways that producers can actually get involved with it. That and more can be expected in the week ahead. But once we return from this short break, we'll be back with more on Agriculture Today.
Listening to Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network. Along with Samantha Bennett, I'm Jeff Wickman. We end today's program with information regarding the upcoming 2022 Kansas Junior Dairy Show being held in Salina. In this week's Milk Lines, K-State dairy specialist Mike Brouk previews this year's event.
Today I'd like to visit with our dairymen as well as just citizens in the state of Kansas about the Kansas All Breeds Junior Dairy Show. This is an event that's been held for the last 57 years in Salina, Kansas. Brings together youth with dairy interest, whether they be 4-H or FFA or just Junior Breed Association members, for many different activities. Again, this is an annual event. It's hosted between Kansas State University, the Kansas Dairy Commission and Association, as well as the Salina Area Chamber of Commerce. So what do we do at the Junior Dairy Show? Well, there's lots of things that go on. First off, August 11th, which is a Thursday, will be the day that the entries come in. So by 8 in the evening, all animals should be in place. Then on Friday morning, we start off with a state dairy judging contest. This contest will select young people that would be going to represent Kansas at some additional contests in the fall. In addition to that, we also have a quiz bowl in the afternoon, along with a dairy skill-a-thon. That evening, we have an exhibitor's banquet to make announcements about the show that starts the next day. So then on Saturday, we start right away at 7:30 in the morning, and that's our fitting and showing contest, where young people exhibit the animal that they have brought specifically for that part of the event. This is open to students of all ages. Even 7 and 8-year-olds can participate in a non-competition class, with those that are older than that participating in competition classes. Then at 9 a.m., we have our overall breed judging, and we show all different types of animals there. So we have classes for Holsteins and Jerseys and Brown Swiss, and we even have a crossbred class that we offer as well for those that might have crossbred animals. Following that, we will have our final selection of the top animal in the show, as well as our county herd events. So this is an event for everybody that has a dairy interest in the state of Kansas. If you're a Dairy 4-H member and you have a dairy project, this would be an event that you could participate in. We'd invite you to come to Salina August 11th through the 13th to participate in this event. If you wish to register for the event, you need to do that by August the 5th, and you can do that online. Our registration as well as other information is available at www.asi.ksu.edu/Junior Dairy Show. Or if you just go to the K-State website and you just search for the Junior Dairy Show, you'll find the link to the area where you can register online and obtain additional information about the show and activities that are associated with it. Again, we invite you to participate in the 57th Annual Kansas All Breeds Junior Dairy Show, being held in Salina August 11th through the 13th. This is Mike Brouk with K-State Research and Extension, encouraging our dairymen and young people to participate in the Kansas Junior Dairy Show.
Thanks, Mike. Again, for more information or to register for the 2022 Kansas Junior Dairy Show, being held August 11th through the 13th in Salina, go to the Kansas State University Animal Sciences and Industry website at www.asi.ksu.edu, then click on the link for Junior Dairy Show. In addition to the online registration information, you'll find several helpful links to fitting and showing dairy cattle, including a beginner's guide to showing dairy cattle judging, dairy showmanship, and the new Dairy Showmanship Scorecard. That webpage also features the animal classes for the 2022 Junior Dairy Show, information and rules for the show, and the PDCA Code of Ethics. Again, the website, www.asi.ksu.edu, then click on the link for Junior Dairy Show. And that'll do it for the Tuesday edition of Agriculture Today. Along with Samantha Bennett, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.